Welcome to the Carl Vibe Show. We are live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and believe it or not, even Twitter. I figured out how to do that the other day, so that's really cool, you guys. But yeah, we're going to roll through the intro right here. We've got a return guest today, but you know, this is a special guest. Every time we have Brad Voorhees on here, we have a madman in the house. Certifiable madman. He's building a free energy device in his home. He doesn't even know if this thing is going to teleport him to another dimension, if it's going to explode his house, if it's going to suddenly save the world and solve all of our energy problems. But he is the man for the job. And every time I have a conversation with him, I learn something new. We connect in a different way, and we've become good friends. And we chat all the time and check in on each other, even on a personal level. And I feel like now in my life, it's like my friend circle is changing, and it's like I'm a part of a team of X-Men. I've got one guy over here, a good buddy Brad, who's building a free energy device that's probably going to work someday and shock the world. I've got friends that build diaceaning goggles so that you can see into the etheric realm. I've got professional remote viewers that help find missing persons and do all kinds of stuff. And here I am in the middle, and every time I do meditation, I'm told that I'm supposed to be some kind of a mouthpiece. So here I have this show trying to get all my friends out there and get the message out so that we can try and change the world. That's the purpose of what we're doing here. And Brad Voorhees with Sonic Gravity and his device for free energy, we're going to be exploring all that today and talking about that and go wherever it goes, because every time I talk to him, we go down deep alleyways and we explore the maze of reality and the universe and human consciousness, and you name it. We go down that rabbit hole and we go deep. So without delaying any further, I'm going to be taking a look at your comments as we go. But let's bring in Brad Voorhees from Sonic Gravity. How you doing, Brad?
Hey, Carl. It's great. Thanks for having me.
Dude, that was like the best intro I've ever done. That felt like it just flowed out so smooth, right?
Yeah, I know. I was like, man, who's this guy? Who's this guy he's bringing on? I can't wait to meet him.
I have to turn my brain off and just let that intuition kick in, and pretty soon the truth just flows right out. And here we are again. Brad, you've been working on this device, and do you have it in your house or your garage, or where are you building this thing?
Well, the first one I built halfway. I built at Falcon Labs. Mark Sokol. I started over at his place, and then I finished it on my deck, and then so I tested on the deck, and it worked really well. I think I dropped about a half a pound or 2.5 pounds of mass, and the whole idea is this electromagnetic field generator, right?
Yeah.
I build this rig, I put it on top of a scale, right? And if it works, it should reduce the mass of the rig itself.
Right.
And so it should essentially, when I put it on the scale and turn it on, it should just get lighter. And that's how I know if it works or not. So the first one actually got some really sort of definitive resonance, and it dropped like a couple pounds and then swung back. But it was oscillating about a half pound lighter than it was at rest. So that was really kind of awesome. Second one, I thought would be a lot better because I made it spin really fast and all that. That didn't really work. That was not a successful. That was a bust compared to the first one. And so, but this one that I do is going to absolutely rock. I mean, it's going to be insane, because what I realized was, okay, so the way it works, let me just rewind for anybody who doesn't know. So there's something called a Faraday disc, right? And so you have two magnets like this, and then if you spin like a metal disc in between it, essentially the magnets like shove the electrons away, and so you get a plus on the outside of the disc and a minus on the inside of the disc, and it's like a battery. And so then you connect it, and then once you have that circuit, anytime you have a circuit where electricity is flowing around, you have a magnetic field. You just get one.
Right.
It's like the physics. And so, but in a Faraday disc, where you're using a disc to spin, your magnetic field blows through the disc. So it blows through the disc and it comes back around back in the back of the disc. And so the way the Tic Tacs fly, right? So anyway, so imagine a magnetic field that's, blowing like a donut kind of.
Right.
So
like a torus energy field. So you're kind of emulating the actual like atmospheric field, electromagnetic field of the earth, and basically everything. Like you're just taking like a fractal of that and doing it on your back deck or whatever.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so the then that's exactly what we're doing. And so imagine a magnetic field that it has a high left-hand electron density that if you want to know about that, you can check out my podcast. But what it does is instead of a full disk that pushes a constant field out, what I did was I made it spokes. And I made it the magnets around it. Instead of like one fork that was a magnet, I put magnets all around. And so what happened was, what the whole idea is that when the spokes and the magnets line up like this, you have a field. When they go like this, you don't have one. When they go like this, you have one. When they go like this, you don't have one. And you spin that around really fast, and then your field is kind of going off on, off on, off on, off on.
So it's almost like you're creating like an electromagnetic binary, like a 1 0 1 0, like so the spokes go from aligned to misaligned, and so it creates pulses, and then I'm just trying to grasp this.
Yeah.
And
no,
then
you got it.
And then
That's
you're
exactly
using that torus field, which is already existent in nature and naturally wants to go that way.
Yeah.
And you're almost like a reburner. You're curving that energy back in on itself, so it becomes like a over energy. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like a shield
over. That's why they call them over unity devices. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it bumps. And the thing is, okay, so when you think about quantum fields, right? So it's like, imagine your TV, right? You're looking at your TV, you got all these little pixels, right? In your TV. Inside each one of those pixels is like a color element, right? Like one's red, one's blue, one's green. And so inside each one of those teeny pixels, if you like, change the combinations or they flash or whatever, like if you leave the red and the blue, you get a purple, right?
Right.
And so you can make all the colors in the rainbow in each pixel with different combinations, right? So imagine you're looking at your HD picture and you turn off all the blue and the green ones. So all you're looking at is different levels of red. And so sometimes it'll be bright red. Sometimes it will be nothing because there's no red there. But when you look at all the red all at once, that's like the red quantum field in your picture.
Right.
Right. And then if you did only the blue one, and so you saw blue all the way through, that's like the blue quantum field all the way through. But when you take the blue, the green, and the red, and you put them all back together, boom, all of a sudden you have a full HD picture on your TV.
Right.
So now imagine like the Higgs field, right? Imagine that's like not one of the colors, but it's like the electricity in the pixel, right?
Right.
So you have, and in reality, essentially, there's like 13 different color elements, right? There's like, I'm sorry. Well, anyway, there's like 4 forces and then there's like 12. So there's like 16, or if you count the Higgs field, like 17. Anyway, but there's essentially like 16 different fields in reality that once you lay those all over, then you have like, the universe. And so anyway, so what we're trying to do is essentially turn off just one of those fields. We're just trying to turn off the Higgs field. We're trying to disconnect from the Higgs field. And so it's just like all in like one spot on your TV. We're trying to turn off all these pixels. We're trying to disconnect those pixels.
Gotcha.
And what we know is this, there's this left-handed electron. And the reason it gets slowed down, it doesn't go as fast as a photon. It gets slowed down because we know the Higgs field is pulling on it. But we know from Newton's third law, right? If the Higgs field is pulling on that left-handed electron, then we know that left-handed electron is pushing on that field.
Right.
So what we want to do is push it like a swing. And so we're going to pump it and we're going to knock it so it comes back, and we're going to pump it again and knock it so it comes back. And if we do that enough, we might be able to build enough energy in the Higgs field that it will go to a different ground state and decouple. It will break the symmetry of it. And when that happens, the bosons and the stuff in the Higgs boson, which gives our matter mass, will bust out and it'll trail into the past. And so that's where the mass reduction comes from.
Oh, man.
And you can see, like, if you look at a physics book and look for the energy of the Higgs field, like in a vacuum, it's like non-zero, but it goes down like this. And if we can put just enough energy, we can roll that ball into the ditch and decouple the Higgs field, and then we won't have any mass. And that's how those Tic Tacs like zip around like bullets, is because they don't have any mass. And so
by Tic Tac,
so
you're referring to the UFOs. Like we're talking about, like this applies to like anti-gravity and even the an element of time travel in a way, quantum time travel, where you're if you're decoupling from the physical binds of gravity and space-time, if you're moving that fast in a way, that's my brain is grasping all of this, because then you're decoupling. You're right. If
you lose your mass, what happens is your particles, like all your massless particles, they instantly start to oscillate at the speed of light, and all of your mass goes into the past. And I talk about quantum gravity, right? So it's essentially, the bottom line is that when you stretch, when your mass flies into the past and stretches, gravity is tension in the Higgs string. And so what you'll have is the bosons will go into the past, and the tension in that Higgs string, right? Because those bosons have to end up somewhere in the past. And that's positive energy that's in the past. Now, here's the thing. There's something called the law of conservation of mass energy. So when they go into the past, they cannot accept, that time, slice of time could not accept that positive energy unless it's wrapped in negative energy density to cancel it. And so that, because like you can't add or destroy energy in any particular brain of time. So like if you took the whole universe, like it was like a movie, right? And I talk about this like slices of cheese, but if you took, totally, gravity's BS.
Gravity's BS.
And so, gravity's for losers. And so if you take like a film, right? And in the face of the film, that's like the universe as we see it. And every little frame is like an instant of time. Well, imagine chopping all those up and stacking them like slices of cheese this way. So now time is a distance. And in my podcast, I have this theoretical physicist that I totally like combed all his YouTube videos. His name's Dr. Matt O'Dowd. And he said that when you get to essentially the surface of the black hole at the quantum level, when you go to the black hole at the event horizon, time becomes distance and nobody gets this. Nobody gets it. But the reason it is because when you stretch that Higgs string over all those slices of cheese, it's Planck lengths in distance from those stacked time frames. And so
it's really as simple as people not understanding that time is only a measure of distance. And we always like to say space time, but it's actually space time.
Yeah.
It's all really one thing. It's like you moving through it over a distance is how we even measure the concept or perceive any kind of an illusion of time. And so when you break down that sense of distance and make it instantaneous, then you're decoupling from what you're stuck in your timeline.
You actually nailed something. Like I'm trying to I was like, oh man, I like that what you just said, because time, when you think about it, how do you sense time, right? Because it's like you don't, like, if your eyes, right, if there's a light, you see it, right? If there's a sound, you hear it. If like something comes in contact with you, you might feel it. And like, remember your brain doesn't interact with anything. All it does is receive signals, electrical signals from like your nerves and stuff. But for time is weird, because the only way I think you can perceive time is essentially when the hologram in front of you changes, right? Like, and I actually did something, and we got to get to this consciousness, dude. And we're going to talk about like how you've lost so much weight too, because, but like consciousness is, I think our consciousness is sitting on the surface of a black hole. And the black hole, and I didn't make like all of this up, like Gerard Hoof, he's a Nobel Prize winning physicist, him and Leonard Susskind, they came up with this holographic theory of the universe. And what they said was that you could encode the universe and all of the physics that it needs and all that stuff on a holographic surface of a black hole, and it would perfectly encode a 3D universe inside. And so that's what I think. I think our consciousness, it runs over this black hole surface. In the same way our brain receives signals, we're actually receiving signals from the surface of this hologram, and it's encoding a 3D universe inside. And one of the things that is really interesting is that if you're sitting there on the surface of the hologram, like the energy on the hologram, like I think it must be constant, just because of the law of conservation mass energy. It just makes sense. And so I think our consciousness sitting on the surface of this black hole is actually fighting over the energy with time. Because here's the thing, you get tired the longer you're conscious. And I think it's because time is trying to blow through the black hole where you're sitting, where you're at, changing the hologram. But the more energy you're taking to run your brain, the less energy time has. And so you're actually jamming up time by being awake.
Oh,
you're slowing down time. And so that's why you get tireder as you go. And then what happens when you get too tired?
That's such a ridiculous reason for why we go to bed. That is so funny.
But think about it though. You get tired because like time is like the time pressure. I call it psychic pressure from the arrow of time. And then what happens once you get so tired, because like the time pressure is so high, it blows you off the hologram. Your consciousness releases the energy, and in the 3D world, you go unconscious.
Right.
And then you sleep, and time passes really fast. And all of a sudden, you wake back up, and like 6 hours has gone by.
Right. Exactly.
So
some people might have a difficult time fathoming this, because when we start talking about our consciousness, like right here and now, is riding on the surface tension edge of the information of a black hole. And you say, well, no, it isn't. I'm sitting in my podcast room with a lava lamp and I can take a drink of water. I don't have any perception of that. But you have to imagine for a minute, and this is something that was key for me. And after our last interview, if you guys haven't watched that, you should go check that one out too. Like what I puzzled on that for a while after our last conversation. And think about it like this: if you were a transcendent interdimensional being, or your consciousness, and you're trying to strive, like if you think about it, everything in the universe is like yearning towards its evolutionary progress or its transcendence. Like a seed is trying to sprout to the surface and become a flower and to continue the cycle. So if we're doing the same thing at some phenomenal level, and the universe is like information and a hologram, or like a solid state drive of everything, or the all, or the overmind, whatever you want to call it. Imagine if we're actually two-dimensional entities, but being on a two-dimensional flat plane, as a transcendent consciousness tries to search for itself outside of that, it may perceive holographically like a three-dimensional reality that is very illusory. So you would, just like in a video game, is just flat information on a solid state drive. But when you are searching to go through that information, like on a timeline, it emerges as a three-dimensional realm, like a psychic experience of a hologram. And somehow our bodies and the way that we're interfaced with this black hole, it's like we're actually on the surface of this black hole of information. And our consciousness now is just awakening and is emerging up through that. And it perceives everything as though you're in the room drinking a glass of water with a lava lamp, because it's within our nature to always try to emerge into the future dimension where we're trying to wake up to and to get into from where we're actually at. Because just like a seed trying to become a flower or something come out of the cocoon, I don't know if that's a good explanation or not, but that's how it's possible that we could, just like Neo in the Matrix, actually be in a pod somewhere, but perceive psychically like we're in an entire world walking around on the streets of New York, when really you're just in like a pod in some vacuum chamber somewhere. If we're actually surfacing the information, like surfing on the information of the universe on this black hole, we may perceive that holographically, fractally, as though our consciousness is trying to probe through that as a three-dimensional experience at a level higher than we actually are. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. Okay. I mean, so I'm totally catching what you're throwing. And when you think about, to somebody, like, that was a good point. Like when you said somebody might think, oh, well, look, I'm grabbing this, I'm seeing this, I can see it's like 3D. But when you look at those like 3D shooters and you are playing like PUBG or you're playing like, Call of Duty or something, when you're in there playing it, man, it looks 3D. Like there's no question. Like you can see like, oh, he's around that corner or whatever. I'm gonna throw my grenade over there. Like there's no question in your mind, you are seeing a 3D universe. So, and when you think about like your brain inside your skull, right? Your brain, all it's doing is interpreting signals, right? So when you look at that lava lamp, you're just getting an electrical signal that your brain is interpreting as a lava lamp. Like your brain doesn't actually see anything.
Right.
So if your brain can receive those electrical signals and interpret the universe as you do, then there's actually like no logical like argument that it's possible that you could just be energy on the surface of a black hole receiving the same information that your senses are sending your brain, but you're receiving it from this hologram.
Right.
If your brain, if we can agree that your brain interprets only electricity and this is what you get, then there's really kind of like, you can say it, but it's really the same thing no matter what, and it's just like, instead of what you see around in reality, you look at one of those 3D shooters, man, it's the same thing. You feel like you're walking this way and that way. But here's the really interesting thing. If we consider, just for the sake of argument, consider this hypothesis or conjecture even. Well, no, hypothesis. It's a hypothesis. Consider the hypothesis that we're on the surface of this black hole and our consciousness is in some ways competing with time for the energy. Now, here's one thing that I looked up in a podcast that called Controlling the Flow of Time with Psychic Power or whatever. So if you look at a hummingbird, right? A hummingbird beats its wings at 200 times a second. Do you think it has fast muscles, that it's just that fast? A bee beats its wings at 600 times a second. Right. Now, if you shook anything like that 600 times a second, you'd tear it off. Like there's just no way. But here's the thing. If our consciousness is competing for time, do you know what the neuron density of a human is? Our per gram and it actually goes by surface area, but per gram, we have 53 million neurons as human beings in our brain. 53 million neurons per gram. So for every gram you have, there's of brain matter, there's like 53 million neurons. A bumblebee has like 12 trillion, between 12 trillion neurons per gram and 2 trillion neurons per gram. And so if you think about their brain is competing for not electricity, but energy on the surface of the black hole, 12 trillion or even 2 trillion is so much more energy demand on the hologram than our 53 million brain. And so because the bee sucks all the energy with its consciousness out of the hologram, and when you look like aerodynamically, a bee is like the human equivalent of Chris Christie flapping trash can lids to fly. Seriously, I said that, but because its consciousness, its brain is so neuron dense, it takes so much energy from the hologram that it leaves time, very little energy to change the hologram. So its time crawls compared to ours, which means it's like the Flash where we're like,
really, it's like they talk about that, like even in the Tesla car, like the AI sensors in a Tesla auto driving system, like our brain only operates at like, I don't remember, 72 frames a second or something crazy like that. But these cars now that do self-driving are like over 33,000 frames a second. So the processors in these self-driving cars actually perceive time as if it's in ultra slow motion to them. And so like a hummingbird, like you said, is processing reality at a completely different frame rate than us.
Way faster.
So we perceive them as just going taking off, but to them, we're just moving in this beautiful, graceful, slow motion reality because they're decoupled in a way from the field of time. Their time is slower
they
than
don't
ours.
have fast muscles. They have slow time. And it's like the Flash where, he's just like running normally and everybody else is like, going really slow. And like the bumblebee has like trillions of neurons, and so that's why it can beat its wings 600 times a second. But the hummingbird has something like 500 million or 600 million, and we have 53 million. They have like 600 million and change. And so that's why they're beating their wings at 200 times a second. It's not because they have fast muscles, it's because they have slow time. And so just like you said, they're experiencing time so much, their time is so much slower that they can react like in a like just like, you know, what takes us a second to do takes them a millisecond to do.
Right.
And so if that's true, I mean, and if you do, and the other thing is like if the hummingbird, right, the heart rate of the sleeping hummingbird is, and remember, when you sleep, you're unconscious and time flows normally. Well, when the hummingbird is asleep, its heart rate is 60 beats per minute, just like a human being's. But when it's awake, not when it's beating its wings, when it's awake, its heart rate is 1,250 beats a minute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that is really strong corroboration that number one, we are on the surface of black hole. And number two, our consciousness actually matters when it comes to the flow of time. And like, it's a big fucking deal. And think about this. What if you could take a pill and multiply your neurons by like 1,000? Okay.
Or better
now
yet,
you move like the Flash.
What if you had like a headset, which my friend is actually reverse engineering, that was used by the Stanford Research Institute to amplify these effects within cognition and within the brain for out-of-body travel and remote viewing, which in a sense is kind of like turning your consciousness into a higher frame rate or magnetic signal, just like the hummingbird, and then transcending out of your body in a way in order to do phenomenal things. And so,
dude, I believe it. I think like the reason I kind of stumbled across this, right, was I was my wife's dog, Milo, just died. And Milo got her through like all kinds of like abusive relationships, and like, you know, it was horrible. I mean, she loved this dog. She liked him more than me. And that's okay because Milo's more likable than me. But I was trying to figure out a way that I could prove that Milo, his soul, was going to heaven. And so what I figured out was, though, if our energy is actually running across the surface of this black hole, Stephen Hawking proved that there's energy that's leaving the surface of the black hole. And I'm serious. I think that when we die, we carry with us our information that we have in our memory and in our DNA, and we carry it off the black hole to, I think, either the next black hole. And I think that's what, reincarnation would be. If you go to the next black hole up, the one that's enclosing the surface of the universe that your black hole was in when you died. Or maybe if you're like me or Christian, you believe in Jesus Christ, your soul, your energy that's running over this surface, it makes heaven really plausible. Because if there's a black hole and there's other black holes inside these other black holes, then there must be a primordial black hole, the first black hole. And if our consciousness is running over the surface of this one, and the hummingbird kind of makes me think that's true, that then it's plausible that our consciousness can make it to the primordial black hole. And think of evolution. If you believe in evolution, the changes in our DNA and all that kind of stuff, all that information going back to the primordial black hole, that's really evolution. Right. And so in a lot of ways, and you know, from physics, right, quantum information cannot be created or destroyed. It's the law of conservation of quantum information. And the law of conservation of mass energy says energy can't be destroyed. And so if you believe in physics and you believe our consciousness is running over the surface of a black hole, then that means our consciousness, vibe, chi, energy, soul, spirit is immortal. And that is a fact. And so anyway, so what I sort of figured out was, and this other thing, Gerard Hoof proved, after they kind of went back and forth about Hawking radiation, came up with this holographic principle, that all of the all of the Hawking radiation that was ever emitted and that will be emitted in the future, that Hawking radiation must be quantumly entangled to what's going on inside the universe, inside the black hole.
Right.
And it has to be quantumly entangled to all future and all past Hawking radiation. And guess what? That's what DNA is. When your parents, grandparents died, you are quantumly entangled through your DNA to them. And so that's all the Hawking radiation in the past. And all the future Hawking radiation is your kids, my kids, their kids, all the way into the future. And it's quantumly entangled to like us right now. So that's the math. I didn't figure that out. That was Gerard Hoof. But the geometry of the sonic gravity theory of everything, the geometry of the universe accommodates that, makes perfect sense. And so what I told my wife and what I put in a podcast episode I just did called All Dogs Go to Heaven, was the idea that if these hummingbird and if the bee are really, and I think they are, I think it makes perfect sense. You know, we get tired. That's why we get tired. It's psychic pressure from the arrow of time. But if when we die, our consciousness, spirit, vibe, energy, whatever you want to call it, goes off the black hole, right? Where does the information go? Well, I think it goes either to the next black hole and then all of a sudden, boom, you get born there, or you go to the primordial black hole and boom, you're born in what I think is heaven. And I think it's plausible that, you know, at the end of an infinite cycle of evolutionary big bangs, you have perfection on the primordial black hole. And that is a lot of faiths, that's what they think nirvana or heaven is. And so in a lot of ways, just the notion of consciousness being on the surface of black hole makes a lot of room in the geometry of the universe for heaven and for hell and all kinds of room for different faiths and stuff. It's pretty fucking amazing, if you ask me.
Yeah, and everything, even when you take it just at literal physical levels, like we have the entire physical reality, there's also the infinite empty space that is the counter space to that. And that goes on forever. And we have no idea when you leave the physical realm of reality what that counter space or non-physical space actually is like. And it could totally be not just a dark blank void of a vacuum that we think it is, but it could be literally the substrate of the unified field of everything that exists over there that we perceive as just a blind spot or this empty darkness because we're pointed on a totally different timeline and vibrating on a different frequency, because our consciousness can only go so fast through this information or we exhaust ourselves, because there's like diminishing returns on how much information you can put out there and gather while you're surfing on the edge of a black hole, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, maybe the cap of your energy capacity is what determines your lifespan. Maybe you get full and it's like, dude, you're done.
Your telomeres are worn off and you're done. Yeah, right? So let's tie this back into your free energy device. This is all really important to understand this, because you have to understand the nature of the actual reality, not just the basics of what we've been taught in public school. We want to glean from that, but then take these phenomenal ideas and you have to get radical with them. And that's what you're doing. You're looking at the core, and you've, I think, uncovered the secret. Like if you go read the books of Arthur Young, the inventor of the Bell helicopter, first of all, he was into like astrology and like synchronicities and all this stuff, but he kind of realized the same thing, that the universe ultimately operates on just such very basic elements. Like when you think about it, all of the math that you've ever heard, all of the scientific calculations and trigonometry and everything ultimately boils down to the numbers, 0 through 9. And those in random combinations account for all of the math that's ever been done. Every single word that's ever been spoken in the English language boils down to just the letters of the alphabet. Everything that you can see in reality can be broken down just into the prism of the colors of the rainbow. So with a few tiny elements to begin with, the universe can mix and match those in infinite combinations and produce anything. And so you've kind of getting to the core, you understand these basic principles of how reality works, even beyond the physical, and you're trying to build this device that kind of cheats the boundaries of that in order to help us realize that and move to another level.
Yeah, but I mean, in a lot of ways, you want to know what cheating is. Let me tell you what cheating is. Okay. Astrophysicists, theoretical physicists. Well, okay, we don't need to go down this rabbit hole right now, but remember, just like remind me about how they calculate electron scatter and it's called the electron free energy correction. Just say electron scatter, because you know who cheats? It's the physicists. Okay. And I'll tell you how they do it. Their math, they cheat. Their math doesn't capture Feynman equations and doesn't appropriately capture what's called electron scatter, when the electron, you just kind of, when it doesn't bounce, when it like feeds off itself a little bit. All their calculations go wrong. It goes to infinity. And I will give you the answer to a millennium problem called the Yang-Mills problem. There's 7 unsolvable math problems in the world, and there's millennium math problems. And I have the answer to one of them called the Yang-Mills mass gap. And anyway, I'll give it to you, and like everybody will hear it. But yeah, but who cheats? You want to know who cheats? It's the physicists. Right. And anybody who knows how to do those, the wave equations for electron scatter, they'll be like, yeah, he's right, we cheat. So you can ask them, just ask them, they'll be like, yeah, we kind of do that. So, but anyway, yeah. So here's how the field works. Sorry, we digressed. So it generates a field, and it's like pushing somebody on a swing, right? And eventually, if you build enough energy in this Higgs field, you can drop it to what they call a ground state. And that's when our particles will lose their mass, and our mass will fly sort of into the past. Well, not sort of, it will fly into the past. But here's the thing, it gets enshrouded with negative energy density to balance out in that instance of time, in that slice of cheese in the past. It has to be net zero. So all that mass will go as far back as the gravity, the Higgs string, the gravity that it generates to counter that mass. But here's the thing, that's why you get cow mutilations, right? Where their faces are torn off, because when there's a quantum echo, right, which is we're zipping around in the past, or we're zipping around in the future, but their echo comes back to our past. We're actually viewing them through a wormhole, because their mass is in our time, because it's in the past. It's enshrouded in gravity. And so when you're in the future zipping around Farmer Bob's like pasture, right? In the past, where like Farmer Bob's great grandfather has cows, right? When grandpa's cow goes up to check out that quantum echo of like our future craft and kind of sticks his nose up there to smell it, that's why if you look at pictures of cow mutilation, that's why their face skin is like ripped off and their bodies are just jacked, and they look like all kinds of pressure wounds and crushed bones and all that kind of stuff. It's because the quantum echo is wrapped in gravity, and the cow got too close and gets wrecked. Gets like scrambled with gravity. So anyway, that's just cow mutilation, and I thought it was cool. But so what happens when we have this generator that that spins around and it creates this field that decouples the Higgs field? Well, if you do just one, like a saucer, right? That's why saucers are round, I think, is because you have this modified Faraday disc spinning. So a saucer is perfect. But if you have one going like, if you have one that just goes around like this, and then you have one that goes like this, well, now you've created a field envelope where you're totally closed off, right? Right. And so now you are completely disconnected from the Higgs field. And the Higgs field is, we talked about, it was like the electricity in our TV or whatever. When you decouple the Higgs field is what leashes all of the matter in the universe to this instance of Planck time, to our instant of time. And so, time dilation, when you move, like say you move, you feel like you hit the gas in your Corvette and you kind of get thrown into the back seat. Yeah. Okay. The reason that is because you have these slices of time, right? Well, there's something called time dilation. And if you go faster through space, you move slower through time. And so you have all these times. So imagine like, okay, a little slower is this way. So to move slower through time, gravity is pulling you back in time.
Right.
Because Einstein said that there's equivalence of mass gravity and inertial gravity. And that's what quantum gravity is. And nobody knows this. This is just me. This is the sonic gravity theory of everything. But quantum gravity is the stretch in the Higgs string that you feel when your time dilates. Because you don't feel G's because you're moving through space. Like when you jump out of an airplane, right? You're hauling ass through space. You're falling down super fast, but you don't feel like crushed into the back of your parachute. You just kind of float down and it's pretty nice and just don't open your mouth. And so so moving through space doesn't give you gravity. It's moving through the curvature of time. And when you jump out of a plane, you're getting closer to a center of gravity, right? Which is slowing your time, but you're also accelerating, which is also slowing your time. So it matches and you never pass through the curvature of time. But if you're taking off in a rocket, you're accelerating, which is slowing your time, but you're also leaving the Earth's gravity well. You're getting further out of a gravity well, and that's accelerating your time. So you're getting tugged both directions by the Higgs string, and that's the pressure of gravity that you like the G's that you pull when you're launching in a rocket. Right. So that's how quantum gravity works. And so it's really, there's something called a modulus elasticity. Like it's like, you know, if it's like a 10-pound spring, you pull it 10 pounds, you go like 1 inch, right? You pull 20 pounds, you go 2 inches. Right. Well, so the solution to quantum gravity is the time dilation times the modulus elasticity of the Higgs string divided by r squared times the speed of light squared. That's the equation for quantum gravity. That's the solution.
Hang on while I do that in my head real quick.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. No.
Yeah. So
you cracked it, man, huh?
Yeah. Oh, but the reason that I haven't had more than like 3.5 pounds of mass reduction and I just figured out, and it's stupid. I can't believe it took me this long to figure out. So I attached a voltmeter to a multimeter to my setup. And so my generator was only generating about a milliamp of electricity, right? So, you know, the spinning disc is a battery and all that. I put a sensor on it and I was only generating a milliamp and a millivolt. And that's pretty fucking pathetic. It's like 1/millionth of a watt, which is fucking nothing. And so I'm like, no shit. Maybe that's why I'm not getting any results, because I'm only pumping, you know, I'm only rocking, you know, a nanowatt. Fuck, you know, that sucks. And so what I was like, well, okay. So I went and bought a 35 kilowatt amp, like for a stereo.
So you're stepping it way up now.
Oh, dude, it's a billion. It's going to be 1 billion times more juice. And so I got this amp. I did the math on all the circuits and the ohms and the resistance and everything. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be jacking 2 channels of 160 watts, which is 160 like billion times more than, or I don't know. I'll check the math on it, or it's like 1 trillion times, whatever. I was in nano before. No, so it's 1 billion. It's like 160 billion times more. And I'm going to be in kilowatts. And I was in nanowatts. And so, and I'm going to run 2. I'm going to run one that constantly runs. The bottom of my spinner is going to be like a regular Faraday disc. And what that's going to do is it's going to polarize everything. So it's going to be totally smooth. It's going to stay smooth. And then on top, that's when I got an oscilloscope. Okay. And what an oscilloscope does is it goes and it makes a signal that my amp is going to jack. Right. And so, so my signal is going to be pumping out in megahertz, right? Millions of pulses a second. So my signal is going to be in megahertz, and I'm going to have 160 billion times more juice flying through that thing. And I think I'm going to suck some fucking shit into a vortex, man. I think this is going to work.
Make sure where your cat is before you turn it on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, so if this doesn't work, if I don't get some appreciable mass reduction. Now, when I was like playing with, like Legos at a nanowatt, I think I lost I mean, I have film of it where it's like it loses some mass. And so I really think if this works, man, it's gonna there's gonna be no question. Like it's gonna be like the weight's just gonna go like it's gotta totally work, or then I might have to face the fact that I'm a fucking madman and none of this is it's just the ramblings of a troubled mind trying to find its place in the universe.
Well, here's a question, and then I want to grab a bunch of questions from over in the comment section because there's some really good ones, some profound ones piling up over there.
Are they like, is he on drugs?
No, they're not.
Some.
They're good. Yeah, so what?
Yeah.
But
why?
So here's a question. Let's say you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, today's the day I'm going to go turn this on. Before you even get to the device to turn it on, do you anticipate that there might be any pre-effects to where like as you're approaching the device, it's already like glowing, or you see energy of light coming off of it? Because technically you'd be sending parts of that back through time, and those traces, like you said, there's always that tail, that reflex that shoots off into the past. So technically, if you're there in the past and you haven't turned it on yet, and that's the day that it actually works, you would know that that's the day it actually works, because as you approach it, it's already showing the effects of working in the near future. Am I crazy, or is that possible?
No, dude. Seriously, as I was building the first one, that is, I mean, those were the kinds of questions that were going through my head. Like, okay, now if this works, shouldn't I see some like really weird shit like before I turn it on? But here's what I think happens. I think so. When you look, there's some like you'll see like UFOs and UAP. Word, Grant, word. The vag will rule. So the one vag to rule them all. So yeah. So I think. This is what I think happens. There has to be. So if you look, the only field which is like non-zero in the vacuum, the only quantum field is the Higgs field, and it kind of looks like in a vacuum, it's got a certain energy. But if you if it goes, if the field strength gets greater, it drops.
Right.
And so you have to build. I think you have to build enough energy to essentially roll that Higgs boson into the ditch. And so I don't think that if you turn it on and you're successful at decoupling the Higgs field, I think it goes a lot further than, I think it goes a lot further than like years. I mean, it goes like a long way, I think. But here's the thing. Here's the other thing. And it really, and I talk about this in Critical Thinking Part 7, UFOs, UAPs, and the Key to Immortality. But I think 100 years ago, somebody may have like looked in the woods, which is where my deck wasn't, but would be years in the future. And if they saw like a floating apparition, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They might go, oh my God, like a ghost, you know what I mean? And then, so it's like, it's possible that some of the apparitions that people might see at any point in time could be a quantum echo, maybe a fuzzy quantum echo of not very much mass from the future. Like it's possible that my VAG, when I fired up, which is the Voorhees anti-gravity engine, when I fire it up, if it does decouple some mass and that mass goes into the past, my suspicion is that it goes far into the past, right? Because like we see these quantum craft flying around and they're not like exploding on ignition, right? Which you would think they would no, you wouldn't, maybe not, because remember their particles are massless. So gravity doesn't affect them. And so if you spun it up and all this gravity appeared around you, it wouldn't affect you because you don't have any mass. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, like really up at like when you think of like Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch up in Vernal, Utah, imagine if maybe like I don't know, like 500 years from now or something like that, there's actually like a highly high-tech futuristic spaceport or an alien spaceport there or something like that,
Or a hospital.
or a hospital. So yeah, so like these UFOs or these advanced time travel craft are taking off, and they don't realize that in the past there's just a farm there in that area where Skinwalker Ranch is, and there's all these echoes, quantum echoes shooting back into our timeline. And so as they discover the side effects of what they're doing is actually affecting the past, they actually travel into the past to try and investigate that, and then end up realizing they've caused cattle mutilations and weird lights to appear. And then when they're coming back to check on things, people look up and they see them in the sky. I don't know. That's just like one
Totally.
plausible
No, good.
explanation, that in the
Yeah, and
future there's a lot of
imagine.
activity, or maybe a military base up there, but it doesn't exist yet. It's We're talking about something in the future leaving a wake behind it in our
Mhm.
timeline as a echo in the past, which they're proving in the hadron collider is like a real thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when particles like collide in the the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, I think there's been I know I saw this on like the History Channel or like, How the Universe Works or something, but those Higgs bosons can appear in the collider in the place the collision happens before it happens. And
Exactly.
so we know that when the collision happens, it could release the Higgs boson that could travel back into the past and poof into existence before the collision happens.
Right.
And so this is not totally bananas, even though it sounds totally bananas. It's not without like, logical foundation. And when you think about, and I talked about this a little bit in Critical Thinking Part 7, imagine if you came up with a quantum chamber, because when you spin it up and if your particles are you decoupled from your mass, then you're timeless, right?
Right.
You have no time at all. And so imagine if you're terminally ill and you go step into a quantum chamber and turn it on, then
Yeah.
your time stops until they figure out the cure for whatever you have, and then they come get you and then fix you. And
Right.
so if you see ghosts walking around, maybe that's somebody waiting around for the cure in the future.
Right.
And if it was you, when you're moving at the speed of light, your time is zero. So in a lot of ways, it's like it only takes you a second. It
Right.
only takes you a second. Like for you, it's a blink. For everyone else, could be years before they came up with the solution. But for you, it'd be nothing.
Do you think
And
this is a really good question from Andy? Not to cut you off there, but like, do you think that maybe some of the side effects of what we're talking about could create this idea of the Mandela effect, where like we perceive alternate timelines? Are you familiar with the Mandela effect?
no, I'm not. Can you tell me what
It's
that
kind of
is?
like this idea that like if you look at things, you remember them quite differently. It's almost like deja vu. So like there's a whole bunch of people who remember these childhood books called the Berenstain Bears. But when
Yeah.
you go and pick up a copy of the Berenstain Bears, it's actually spelled now the Berenstain Bears. And when you look it up, everybody's like, it's the Berenstain Bears. It's not the Berenstain Bears. And it's almost like we've jumped into an alternate timeline. Like
Wow.
people remember somebody dying in their childhood, like it was all over the news, and then you turn around and look, and they're actually still alive, and it's like you're on almost like Man in the High Castle. Like there's an alternate reality or parallel reality, and those, because of what we're talking about, is it going on with technology in the future or something, it's starting to scramble our timelines a little bit. And so do you think that that's possible? Like we just
Oh
mentioned the
yeah.
Skinwalker Ranch, but you could be thinking that you have an accepted reality, uh like somebody was a particular main actor in a movie, but then when you go pull it off the shelf, you're like, wait, I didn't know that that was played by Keanu Reeves. I thought it was somebody totally different. And you're not the only one that thinks that. Everybody thinks that. They remember it
Wow.
completely different than the reality we're in now. So that is kind of a funny thing, but
I think, okay, so let me tell you how I think time travel happens. Like time travel is possible. And 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 theoretical physicists agree it's totally possible. And but what needs to happen for time travel, right, is for a wormhole to be held open, there has to be negative energy density, right? That's what they say. And sometimes, you have all these guys, these physicists saying, oh no, I can do it with, this element 115 or whatever. That's the wrong answer. I mean, just in my view, it's stupid. All you need is decouple this Higgs field. Your mass goes into the past, right? So you're massless right now. So you have no positive energy density at all, right? But there's a massive amount of negative energy density that could hold that wormhole open. And so you have your quantumly entangled mass in the past. You have no mass here, and the tension in the Higgs string is creating gravity that will hold open a wormhole. Like, so if you listen to the in my, I have a episode I did that's called the dark matter and the quantum echo hypothesis. And so I say it, but then I splice in all of Dr. Matt O'Dowd and all the theoretical physics that he explains perfectly that fits into what I'm saying. So it's not me just like making this shit up. Like, I learned it from watching him. I pieced everything together because the one talent that I do have is, or maybe it's a character flaw, but I can assemble different things. Like, I recall the things that I learn, and I just have this weird visualization where I can see these puzzle pieces all fitting together.
Yeah.
And so some of this, I mean, I'm an engineer by education. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in civil engineering. So I'm not afraid of differential equations, and I can keep up when I'm reading, the math. I'm not afraid of the math. It's been a while since I did multiple or differential equations though. And I'm an attorney, right? I have a JD and an LLM and a lot of trial experience and stuff like that. And so I'm fairly good at remembering the facts and seeing how they fit to find the picture. And I have just enough sort of background in engineering and physics and stuff to be able to process what that means and where it fits. And so that's really, and I think the problem with theoretical physics is that everybody's so wrapped up in the math that they're not stepping back and like loving it. They're not like, they're not like seeking truth.
Right.
They're trying to prove and validate their grants and, and all this kind of stuff. They're not sitting in the question with a pure intent. They're not trying to seek truth. I really think the reason that nobody's put this together in 100 years is because they're trying to prove the things that they think are right rather than trying to see what the universe is teaching them.
That's beautifully put. Yeah, absolutely beautifully put, because you get in there and everything is like a proof or an equation, and you're trying to seek after a solution by crunching it. And at some point you have to step back and look at what's actually happening in reality, and you have to fathom that at a deep level, as you've done all this like planning and math and strategizing and visualizing. Has sacred geometry come into play? Sapphire Elf has a good question. Do you have any thoughts on sacred geometry? I know I use
that?
Sacred geometry is like basically, oh boy, okay, I'm going to try and tackle this. I'm going to let the words flow out in a meditative state, and we're going to go for this. So hopefully Sapphire Elf loves this. So okay, so you have your initial awareness, which is like a single point of view, like just this initial witness of who you are, right? And then that would be like a single point. And then as you begin to feel something about that creates like a second pendulum to the equation of consciousness. Like you have a feeling, and then there's like an awareness, and then maybe over here you have like thinking about what has happened before, and that might create another point of view that you're leaning into in your mind and awareness. And then over here there's anticipation of the future. And as you start to draw lines between these points, you can form like a triangle or a pyramid, and it starts to form like these alchemical symbols, like that blossom into Fibonacci sequences and unfold like into all the geometry of reality that's like unfolding. So you have something that starts as a single point, and then as reality unfolds, it goes to a second point, and then a third, and a fourth, and all that. So the idea of sacred geometry is like that as you go all the way back into the ancient past, you have these same like flower of life symbols, the same torus pattern or Fibonacci sequence that's all according to this beautiful geometry like of pi that we can translate into math and things like that. So I guess the question about sacred geometry is like, yeah, it's the art of taking the numbers and the data and being able to three-dimensionally visualize that into an idea
God, dude, yeah.
or
Oh,
concept,
yeah.
and how much that works for you. Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, like that's the only thing. That's the key in my mind to critical thinking. Like, so that's exactly what I try to do when I am critically thinking, right? Because I try to break it down into binary, mutually exclusive like choices. So the first thing I did when I was looking at UAP, I was like, well, it's either us or it ain't us, right?
Right.
Fact. It's like it can only be one or the other. It's either us or it ain't us. Now, if it ain't us, it's aliens, right? And so, like, and it's plausible that many of them are, other spacefaring, sentient beings or drones or whatever. But if it's us, right, then
Yeah.
it can only be us from the past, us from the present, or us from the future. And I was like, well, I mean, like there's some hypotheses and conjectures and stuff that there could be like older ancient civilizations and stuff that could be true. But at least in my thought process, I was like, well, I'm thinking like swords and armor and shit, probably not us in the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the physicists of today are all skeptics and they're like, hell no, it's not. And, you got Neil deGrasse Tyson, making fun of people or whatever, which I kind of rip him a little bit over. I told him he lost all his sonic gravity privileges.
Right.
And so, and so I'm like, well, then it only leaves us from the future. So I'm like, well, it's us from the future. Logically, I think but then I started to see lots of things that kind of made sense. Like they're always flying in our Navy's training areas. Like, yeah, well, that's a clue. But the funny thing is, I was talking about this at some point. What we could do to see if they were like Navy UAP? So imagine like the Navy or like the president. Now write a policy that says if you're flying quantum craft, you got to do it over here and it has to be at this altitude or whatever. If they ink that and put it in a safe and say, you can't change it. Well, that's a time capsule in the future. And so they could just write a policy right now. And then when they all start acting like that, it's like, fuck, that's us. We know you know what I mean? It's us in the future because they would be following that. It becomes a time capsule from here to there.
Right.
I mean, it would be so easy to do that.
It would be really easy for them even to plant seeds in the past, or to try and give yourself a little advantage over your enemies and things by like having something go back in time and crash there to try and inspire a whole movement. So you get this idea all of a sudden of like there could exist sort of like a time travel Cold War that's going on right now that is unperceived by us. We're just getting these quantum echoes of a future time travel war and getting the weird ripple effects of that in our timeline because things are adjusting on the fly as we go at faster than we can fathom speeds,
Yeah, and there's so many, right? Like
Right.
there's like I saw a poster somewhere, there's like, I don't know, 50 different kinds of, craft. So that tells me, right, that tells me it's not just some clandestine bunch of people like, doing them, because there's so many different, like, there's no way you could have like 50 different clandestine manufacturing processes going on around the world and nobody knows. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there may be like one or two, or Skunkworks might have something, or maybe whatever. I don't know, but I think what happens is this technology rapidly proliferates in the future.
Right.
And I think it does because it's fucking simple. And if you
Mm.
listen to my podcast, you can probably do it. If you had the resources to do that, we should already have quantum craft. So, I mean, and if I turn this on when I get this thing built, I have all the components. I just need a little time, and I need Ashley to say, okay, fine, you can fucking build it. Just to like, because I got to work, and then the kids need to. Oh, and by the way, man, I don't know if anybody has a little girl, but me and my girls, we have this ritual like before we go to bed, and they love back art. And so what we do is we take turns, and like on your back, and you draw like a shape, and he want to guess what it is and stuff. Man, they love it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, just throwing it out there.
That's awesome.
But yeah, time travel, right? We're gonna talk about
Yeah.
time travel. So I spin up my craft, right, where I have a concentric vag going this way and then one going this way. And so if you look at the geometry of the fields like that, it becomes an orb. It becomes a completely self-contained. If you have two cylinders like that, it's an orb. So then I get a complete symmetry break with the Higgs field. My mass goes into the past, creates a wormhole between then and now, right? So now craft number 2, a smaller craft, spins up its vag configuration. So it's an orb now too, but it's a little bit smaller, and now it doesn't have any mass. So it flies through the wormhole created by the first one. It essentially flies through the craft, the first craft, and exits the wormhole in the past.
Gotcha.
And now you have a craft that could actually then turn off, and actually its quantum echo jumps even further back, right? Once it goes through the wormhole. And so, and what you have is you have a real craft in the past. And I think that's what you're looking at when you're looking at Roswell, when you're looking at any of those things. It's a craft that has flown through. Essentially, one of the first craft becomes a gate, and then it flies through. Now, that starts getting fucking gnarly if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because if that craft turns off, you're fucked. Like, you're stuck.
Which is why a lot of the initial ones, experimental ones, would probably be drones.
Yeah.
They'd be future tech drones
imagine
without
like
real occupants, or they'd be like clone occupants, or kind of like cybernetic or bio life form type drone creatures.
Could be crash test dummies.
Yeah, that we would perceive as aliens or something. Yeah, that's really strange to think about.
Yeah, and think about this. Imagine combat with quantum craft. So you could and remember, your quantum echo goes as far back as your mass, right? Because it has to cancel the positive energy of your mass. Your gravity has to cancel, because remember, it has to be like the negative energy density has to completely balance the positive energy density of your mass.
Right.
So essentially, and that gravity is determined by the tension in the Higgs string. And so it's all going to be determined by the mass of your craft.
Right.
That's how far your quantum echo is going to go back. So imagine if you're fighting the Russians, right? And they've got a bunch of little ones. Well, you zoom in there with your big fucking craft and you swallow them all. You shove them through your wormhole, and then you fucking eject some mass. So it peels your it peels your wormhole out, and now they're fucking stuck in, like, I don't know, however many BC. And they're just like, fuck. How do we get back?
And then they run into the natives, and like a whole different religion begins off of them, and like, they think they're aliens or something,
right? I mean, but that starts getting gnarly. I mean, like,
So
I mean,
speaking of gnarly, this is one that really throws a wrench in the gears for this concept of time travel, and I want to ask you this one because it's really brilliant, and I've thought about this one too, and it puzzles me. Like, if time travel was a thing, like, let's say you turn your free energy device on your back deck. Well, by the time that device turns on, technically, if you are into physics and astronomy and you believe
Sure.
that we're on an Earth that's moving through space at 66,000 miles per hour on a corkscrew around the sun with all the other planets and the moon, then even if you're out on your back deck and that device turns on, technically it's like 66,000 miles per hour behind you in space on the trail of the planet as we're moving. So
Yeah,
would we
because the
even
Milky
see
Way is
those
flying
effects?
towards Andromeda.
Yeah, we're on the arm of the Milky
yeah.
Way and all that. So how does that trace back? Like, is it quantum entanglement that keeps you experiencing?
No, it's because we're living on the surface of a hologram.
Right.
And so even though, yeah, like, okay, so the 3D universe, right, is encoded inside, and that's what we perceive. It's actually not 3D. It's a 2D holographic surface.
Yeah.
And so it's just exactly like, PUBG or like, Call of Duty. And it's like when you're in that spot of, whatever that battlefield is, if something in the future is going down on that battlefield or whatever in that spot, bam, and the wormhole's there it is. So it's like, so it's true. And let me put it this way. If we're really in a 3D, if we truly exist in a 3D reality, which I don't think we do, and the physics, if you like listen to the quantum gravity at the speed of thought, when I talk about, hey, the sonic gravity theory of everything is that we actually exist on the 2D holographic surface of a black hole. And so you're actually not in a 3D space. Right. And if you think about like quantum gravity, and if my conjecture, my hypothesis about quantum gravity is right, it's mass and space invariant. It's only time. Time is the only thing that is essentially, well, kind of, because there's no, it is mass invariant because mass is energy. And so it's all energy, it's all time.
Yeah.
And so there's no mass part. There's nothing. It's all pure energy. It's positive energy being balanced by negative energy. It's all energy. And so if the quantum echo hypothesis and the sonic gravity theory of everything is right, then we are on the surface of a hologram and there's no space. Space is the hologram.
Right.
It's an illusion.
And the illusion of that is so convincing as a psychic experience of consuming the information on the surface of that black hole that we perceive it as being on a spherical planet that's moving through space at 656 kilometers per hour, according to the microwave background, as Charles says there.
And Gerard too,
right?
He proved that you could encode all of the machinery and the physics and everything on the surface of that black hole that would govern a 3D universe inside.
It's so hard to wrap your head around, man.
But if you think about that, if you think it's just as convincing as the electrical signals that your brain is receiving, because your brain sits in an isolation, like sensory deprivation chamber.
That's true. And perceives everything outside of it. Like,
and it's only electrical signals. Right. It's only electrical signals.
It's really like when you look around, you look out at the distance in the mountains, you look up at the clouds, or you look at your hands right in front of your face. You have to ask yourself, like, where is the seeing actually occurring? And it's really a unified field experience that is interpreted as separate objects over distance, but really it's a flat field, unified solid state experience that we perceive as a three-dimensional realm. Like the mountains are way over there. This whole Doppler effect unfolds. We see things coming closer and farther, and they gain size and shape, and you touch and feel things, and we have all this math that adds up like everything is moving. But in the end, it's all being perceived in one place, and that's in consciousness, which is the collector, where the antenna of the physical meets the etheric, or whatever you want to call it. There's
the quantum entanglement.
The quantum entanglement makes the entire physical reality so convincing. And there's another way that, like, if it's hard to fathom that we could be like on the surface of a black hole and just thinking that it's like this in a physical reality and we're moving through space on a planet, which by the way is why flat earthers are really confused and have like a voice in the game, right? Because these questions are hard. When you start to dig at them, reality falls apart real quick. Physical reality is really loosey-goosey when you start probing at it. But really, like, when you realize it's all occurring within the awareness of consciousness, that everything that appears to be moving and physical all boils down to that substrate of awareness that is occurring. And that could be just two-dimensional plane flying on a black hole being perceived as existing and walking around in a three-dimensional physical realm. Even when you're in a dream, okay, let me make this straight metaphor.
Yeah, let me have it. Lay it on.
If you're in a dream and you look out in the dream and you become aware that you're dreaming like a lucid dreamer, the dream will still exist. The realm, like if you're in a room and there's another person in the chair and somebody's trying to talk to you, just ask yourself right now, what is everything and everyone in the dream actually made of? The person that comes up to you in the dream and starts talking to you, or the car that you see drive by, or whatever you're perceiving, what is it actually made of if not your own consciousness and anticipation and intuition and your subconscious projected outside of yourself as a convincing, vivid, physical three-dimensional reality, to the point that you're scared when you get something chases you. If you fall off of something, you're like, wow, I'm convinced that you're going to die. And it's an
I never thought of that. Yeah.
It's an entire physical psychic experience. And this is the paradox of it, is that the more lucid you are and aware that you're in a dream, the more physical it gets and the more real it is, and the more all of a sudden tangible it becomes to manipulate as a lucid dreamer, right? But we don't consider that in our physical reality as being possible at all, even though we experience it a third of our life every night when we go to bed. And you wake up in the morning and experience physical reality a lot the same way. And that's so convincing, you just cannot accept the fact that all of this is still a consciousness and psychic experience. And 99% of even that is totally in a blind spot to us.
Dude, totally. I mean, just think if everybody's like, oh, look at that sweet lava lamp back there. Well, imagine if I could, and I don't think anybody would dispute this, if I could like surgically like put some wires in your optic nerve that could modify that signal to make that lava lamp disappear. Like if I like dampen the signal or something, and I have like some, I know exactly what the wavelength is that looks like. Does anybody dispute that I could change the electrical impulse and erase that lava lamp from your consciousness? I don't think anybody could dispute that that's feasible. I don't think anybody would disagree that if I could go tap into your optic nerve, that I could cut off your visual perception entirely.
Totally.
So if I could cut off your visual perception, I could make you see whatever I wanted if I had the technology to do that. And so once you realize that your brain is only interpreting signals, and that we have the technology now to fuck with those signals, because we can, change electric frequencies and all that kind of stuff. If you could map that stuff, then you could completely change somebody's reality. So there's no argument that it's possible,
right?
Since all we do is receive signals. I don't think you can say nuh-uh, but I think you have to accept the plausibility that we could be, that the holographic principle of the universe, it's plausible. I just don't think there's a credible argument that it's not. You know what I mean? Like, and when you start to see that, when you see, well, if you contemplate that may be the geometry of the universe, that our consciousness is running over the surface of a black hole, and that we compete with time for the energy on the little spot of the black hole that we're on, then a lot of things start making sense. Like why we get tired, what happens when we go to sleep, why does time blow out, all that kind of stuff. But then when you think about like say you could through consciousness, like through say like I magnified like 1,000,000 times the neurons. Yeah, it's like the source code of the universe. I mean, imagine if I magnified the density of my neurons to the point where, I had a quadrillion neurons. Okay, well now I move like the Flash, right? And the air is like, it's thick like water, right? And so because like air moving and everything, so now I'm superhumanly strong. I could probably pick up cars because it's kind of like they're in the pool,
Would you perceive reality, because if you're moving like as fast or near the speed of light or even beyond that, wouldn't you perceive like the waveform of light and the prism of light differently, so everything would go black and white or red shift? Like Hal Puthoff talks about this with UFO technology, that if you go faster than the speed of light, then reality would shift into this ultraviolet spectrum as reality around you basically slowed down and became
Okay.
like a sand that you could move through. But your ability to look at light bouncing off of objects and to perceive it would shift into this grayscale, because it wouldn't be moving the same speed. So you'd be moving through a different grayscale type reality, or different, who knows what it would look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think you start really, okay, so I just think, okay, so I'm going to logically go from I'm moving this fast, this is what's happening. So I think if you approach the speed of light, and I think this is really kind of, I hate being in this spot, but I think Einstein got it wrong for the same reason that physicists cheat when they do that calculation I was talking about. I don't think when things move the speed of light, I don't think they get heavier. I think they get lighter. And the reason is because I think Einstein didn't have the quantum Lagrangian, which I'll talk about in just a second. But it's just like what'd you say that was? The geometry of sacred geometry?
Sacred geometry, yeah. It's literally like the point to the
Here's the sacred
triangle
geometry.
to the Merkaba, and all the sacred symbols of religion and everything. All of that go back to these simple principles. Like even the DNA helix and everything follows the sacred geometry. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm totally down with that. Here's the sacred geometry of the sonic gravity theory of everything. So we have our instance of time like this, right? So all of the matter in the universe, right? It's all like, it's electrons zipping around. It's like vibrations in these fields. But I want you to think of all of the matter in the universe as just like, kind of one electron that's like orbiting around. So here's our Planck time. So the Higgs field is what leashes this particle to our instance of time. It's a connection from here, and it goes 4 Planck length circle. It's oscillating around.
Yeah.
Okay. Now because we're on this hologram, right? We can only perceive shit that touches the hologram. We don't have anything else. And the reason that physicists think at the quantum level shit teleports.
That's sacred geometry, by the way.
Yeah, dude, same thing. Now draw a line through the top. Okay, that's our instance of Planck time. So where the matter is the circle that's on the top and the circle on the bottom, that's where it intersects our instance of Planck time. That's where it intersects our time. And it's oscillating in a 4 Planck length circle. And so you see at the upper left and the lower left and the upper right and the lower right, it's off the hologram. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so imagine it's spinning around. Now, when it's in the top and when it's in the bottom, it's hitting the hologram so we can see it. Okay, that is observable matter. When it's spinning around the whole time, though, and so whenever it's in the upper left or the lower left or the upper right or the lower right, that's when it's fucking dark matter. Okay,
right. That's
when it's off the hologram, and the only way we can interact with it is the gravity. Like it's no light. It's so if you do the geometry, right, the circumference of that circle is 4 times pi, which is like 12.5, right? So the orbit is 12.5 long, but only for 2 of those Planck lengths, when it intersects the top and it intersects the bottom, only for 2 of those Planck lengths is it observable. Okay.
Right.
So it's only 2 if you subtract off from like 12.55 or whatever, subtract off the 2 that we can see. Now the ratio is 2 to 10.55, right? Because we took the 2 off. 2 to 10.55 is the same as 1 to 5.25. And guess what? That's the fucking exact ratio of dark matter, of measured scientific matter to dark matter. It's the fucking ratio. That is the ratio of dark matter to matter.
Wow. That's incredible, dude.
Yeah, dude. And so when you start thinking
that's actually very significant to realize that.
Dude, now, and am I wrong? Could I be wrong? Fuck, maybe, probably not. I don't think so. But if you notice, when we talk about, and this is really like, I didn't arrive at this sonic gravity theory of everything because I fucking thought it up. I didn't. All I did was open my mind and receive all of these, like for 4 or 5 months, I was just soaking up as much quantum physics and everything as I could. And then I'm just like, shit just fucking falls into place. And I'm like, that's it. Because whenever you get a piece of something new, it has to fit or it ain't right or something ain't right. And so, here's the thing. What we were talking, remember I was talking about like the free electron correction?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the math of quantum field theory, when they're talking about this electron, this free electron, right, that is going like this, right, for like 8 pi times 8/3 pi. So anyway, the fucking time that it's off of the hologram, the same time in their math, the mass in their math goes to infinity.
Right.
It does. And it's the same fucking math. It's the reason Einstein thought that when shit goes to the speed of light, mass goes to infinity, because that's what their math tells them. They're fucking wrong. And you know what they do? Because they know it fucking doesn't go to infinity, they cheat. And so during the time when it would go to infinity, you know what they do? They measure the actual mass and they go, fuck it. And they take it out of their equation and they put in what they think the mass is.
Yeah. They just swap them in place. You have no idea how often
they just
do that.
Fudge factor it. They're like,
They
fuck it.
it
Well, it kind of goes to infinity. So we're going to ignore what our math says and we're going to put in what we know it is. But here's the thing. So what they didn't come up with, and I call this like Voorhees mass action. I call it it's the Quantum Lagrangian, which is essentially to say that when shit moves and gravity sort of pulls it out, more of it goes into off the hologram, right? And so, and then the reason I came to this concept was, okay, so imagine there's all these slices of cheese, right? All these different times. So at some point over here, you and me are astronauts, right? Mm-hmm. And we're floating in space next to each other, just chilling, right? And that's like at this time. And then, okay, so the energy here has to be constant, right? And so then at a time over here, somewhere in the middle, I'm like, bro, poof, and I hit you right in the middle. And now we're both moving. Okay. And then so sometime in the, further down the way, you take a snapshot of that.
Yeah.
So the mass energy has to be equal when we're stationary, and it has to be equal to the stationary when we're moving. Right. So how the fuck can that be equal in a closed system if we're stationary and it's equal when we're moving? Because when we're moving, we have like momentum, which is more energy.
Right.
So how can it possibly work that when we're stationary compared to when we're moving, the fucking mass energy is the same? And the way it is because when we're not moving, we're fucking heavier.
Right.
We have more mass. But when we start moving, we have to trade some of that mass into fucking dark energy so we don't bust conservation of mass energy. So the faster something goes, the less it weighs. It has to be.
The universe, no matter what, is going to reflex itself back to that center point.
It has to be
the center place and the equilibrium, no matter what. If you push against it, it's literally like just pushing against the wall of reality, and it's going to reflex back. There is a jiggle there, and you can
Yeah.
play with it and break the
It's
rules of
gravity.
that surface potential.
When I shove you, you feel you feel the push of your acceleration. Well, guess what? That was the universe pulling a little piece of your mass away, so that because I mean, think about it. If you're 10 pounds going 1 mile an hour, and this is a real simplification, you're 10 pounds going 1 mile an hour. In order to be equal, if you're going 10 miles an hour, well, now you have to be 1 pound, right? Or you're not equal.
Right.
Because it would be like, 10 times 1 is 10, 1 times 10 is 10. So if you're 1 pound going 10 miles an hour or 10 pounds going 1 mile an hour, it has to be equal. So I think that Einstein, and everybody who says Einstein got it wrong is fucking proven wrong. That's like, I don't think anybody's like ever proven Einstein wrong. But here's the thing. You know how E equals mc squared, right? I think Einstein doesn't have all the mass in his equation because he only has the m in his mc squared is only them 2 pieces.
Right.
So he needs 4 pi divided by the g factor to get all the mass. And so if you look on like my blog, I did this 10-page paper that kind of lays out all the math and the geometry. And so if I'm right, then the Einstein-Voorhees energy of mass equation, which includes all the dark matter, is 4 pi divided by the g factor times the observable mass times c squared. That's what it is. E equals all of it times c squared, not just the mass that you can see.
Right.
And when you do that,
the
equation will work out. Yeah, it has to count. All of it has to count.
You can't just count the mass. You have to count all the unseen factors.
And if all you're doing in space is what you can weigh and all that shit, then E equals mc squared works fine. Right. But when you're talking about the quantum level, there's no fucking such thing as mass at the quantum level. It's not mass. Mass is energy. It's bound energy. Right. And so the reason none of this shit works when you get to the quantum level, and the reason they have to fucking cheat on their their free energy of the electron, the reason they have to cheat is because they don't have what I call Voorhees mass action, which is essentially the reservoir of energy of the dark matter.
Right.
That is the sum of the energy of all the shit that's off the hologram.
It's literally like the E equals mc squared. The mass part of that equation is only accounting for like the crust.
Only the 2. Only where it intersects. Only in the 2 places where it intersects.
Yeah, really quick, I want to shout out Andy. This is the first ever super chat donation ever on this channel since becoming monetized. Thank you so much. You're the first one ever to hit the super chat button. I don't even call it out or point it out or whatever. I think if anybody's loving the show and digging it, they're going to find it down there. And all I did was say thanks, guys. So that was really awesome of you. Thank you so much for donating to the show. It's been so amazing so far. I don't want to stop yet. Are you okay on time?
No, yeah, I'm good, man.
Got another 20 minutes or so here. So I'm going to go over here.
I got an hour 20, man. I mean, Ashley said I put the girls to bed, so
Cool. I'm going to dig through the comment section right now because we're going into the night owl segment here. Let's see. Gravity's based on mass. Let's see. Rondonautica. Do you know what Rondonautica is? What in the world is that? Rondonautica, Andy. Sapphire wants to know what that is. Let's see. Looking for questions. Keep going, Brad. Keep talking about your... I kind of cut you off there because the super chat got me excited. So I'm going to pick up some...
right? No, that's inaugural. That's like, that's
a big deal to me. Yeah. It's taken a long time and you were the one. Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. Well, Andy's the man. Like,
For sure.
So, well, the one thing that like, so we were talking about if, E equals mc squared, that's for the observable matter. And what we're talking about is all the rest of it that's off the hologram. Like, so it's actually the energy of mass, I think, is actually the equation is 4 pi divided by the g factor, which is like 2, times the observable mass that you see times c squared. And when you think about it, here's the thing. So if you were totally at rest, if you're absolutely totally at rest, then E would equal all of mc squared. But the thing is we're, like you said before, the Milky Way is flying towards Andromeda and we're like zipping around in circles around the Milky Way. Plus we're going around the sun and there's actually parallax motion like this of, you know, the sun while we're going. So I think that when you look at that, the reason 5.25 reason there's 5.25 times more dark matter is because we're actually moving through space that fast. You know, if all of a sudden we stopped, we would weigh everything, right? But we're actually zipping around really fast, and that's why we only weigh 18% of, like, you know, our mass is observable.
Kind of
I think
like
if we went
in the same way
yeah.
that the hummingbird is sort of cheating it there, as in a universal
Yeah.
way, we're all kind of doing that at a certain level.
Yeah, we're all flying at some insane speed through the universe, but and that's why some of our matter is dark matter right now.
Right.
But if we slowed down, if our speed slowed down, we'd get heavier. If it went faster, we'd get lighter, I think.
Right. Here's another good question from Sapphire Elf. Says, is Einstein's,
Yeah.
let's see, infinite speed equals infinite density, but you cannot add mass to the universe. Is that why things must become lighter to keep with the relativity of the universe?
Yeah, Sapphire. That's what I think. But you got to realize that I'm taking on Stein when I do that. You know what I mean? And I'm taking on every single theoretical physicist that ever lived who was like into that. I'm the only person that I know of that thinks that that is impossible.
Right.
And the one thing that I think kind of helps me in some ways is that if I'm right, is that it's the same reason that the wave equations, when they in the free electron, that they go to infinity when it goes off the hologram. They go to infinity when it becomes dark matter. And that makes sense because what is supposed to happen, and I think if Einstein understood quantum gravity, and this sounds fucking so arrogant, but if Einstein understood quantum gravity like I think I do, then I think he'd say, "Oh, fuck, yeah, you're right. It goes off the hologram.
Yeah.
It's the quantum Lagrangian. It's kind of that reservoir of of dark matter that happens when you accelerate. You some of your shit becomes dark matter." And when you think about a photon, which is moving at the speed of light, which is massless, you know, why isn't a fucking photon infinitely heavy then? Because it's going the speed of light,
Right.
you know? So I'm just, at least in my mind, what I'm saying seems internally consistent. It makes sense to me. And I think the reason that everybody in the field of theoretical physics thinks it makes sense that shit gets heavier is because all they're going by is the math, and that's what they think the math says, and so that's what they're going by. But I'm like I'm channeling you. I feel like my understanding of the universe comes from that sacred geometry like you're talking about. And it just makes sense to me. And they'll go, "Oh, you're a fucking pseudoscientist, you don't know shit." And maybe that's true, but I think what I'm saying makes a lot of sense. And I really invite, you know, anybody to, you know, come needle dick the sonic gravity theory of everything. Show me where it's wrong.
Right.
Show, you know, and nobody will. Nobody, I can't get anybody to, I want to play Take Down the Madman. I want theoretical physicists to come and tell me why what I'm saying doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Because I think it makes I want to know, because like, help get me smarter. You know what I mean? Like
yeah. Somehow
I embrace the idea I might be wrong.
We get these like pillars of academia that become like these sacred things that cannot be touched, and it takes a madman like you to come and rattle those pillars around and not care and kind of wreak havoc and look at it from an alternative perspective to just even fathom the idea that, well, like, you know, Einstein was making a discovery and he nailed down this one part of it, but even in their time, they weren't really fathoming this reservoir of dark matter that even like the Hadron Collider at CERN and those guys are uncovering. And he didn't understand the Higgs boson and the echo phenomenon and all of that stuff. There's so much that has come out of the research and even just our understanding of the universe since then, that sure, like a tool serves its purpose for its time and gets you to a certain point, but sometimes you realize that the tool that you've been using is now slowing you down, and you need to do something because you've evolved and become more efficient than the tool can provide you efficiency. And so that's what you're trying to do, is to poke at that, to prod at it, to challenge it, and to see if you can bend that. And the truth is, you see it all around you. Like you said, in the sacred geometry, when you get away from the number crunching and how it doesn't make sense and all the cheating that goes on there, you push away from that and you just look at reality. You see the sacred geometry on the most sacred places inside the temples of Egypt, and you see it in these Buddhist monasteries on the ceiling, and all of this stuff is, and the Kala Chakra mandalas in Tibet and stuff, all are these sacred geometric symbols. This one that I held up during the podcast is Ezekiel's wheel. It has to do with the vision of or Metatron's. This is Metatron's symbol, where Ezekiel went up on the craft into the sky and met God supposedly, and learned these sacred symbols and things. And it all comes back to that molecular biology and the DNA, and the whole fabric of reality wraps around. And once you look at that, like you said, you're just looking at reality, trying to fathom it within your mind, and this sacred geometry unfolds. And then suddenly you realize that the numbers over here on paper are not doing its job. It's not quite adding up all the way, you know?
Yeah, and the physicists know that too. Anytime they see a singularity or some shit goes to infinity or whatever,
Yeah.
then, you know, I mean, and let me tell you what, these physicists are brilliant, brilliant people. I mean, they're doing math and they're coming up. It's like I feel like all of the physicists that, you know, essentially I'm learning. I mean, like, they toil and grind and whatever, and they come up with like these bricks
Yeah.
of truth, you know, and they did it with the math, and they did it with like incredibly hard work and crazy analytics and, you know, blistering rigor and all kinds of brilliant experiments and everything. And they're coming up with this gold. And so, and really, in some ways, I'm just like an intellectual traveler, right? I'm just like trying to learn and appreciate and breathe in and just like own and absorb all of the brilliancies. Like, you know, you're talking about like the crowning achievements of the lives of all these physicists. And I'm like, okay, I got it there. You know, I believe you. I'm grabbing this. I'm grabbing that. I'm grabbing this. And I just soaked in as much as I could. And I just really tried to assemble all of the truth that I was like pulling from all of these different brilliant physicists. And it's like, and I was just accepting. I'm like, okay, you know, I've just opened my mind. I'm taking that, I'm putting it in here. I'm taking that, I'm putting it in here. And then I just kind of, it's like a puzzle. And I see where things are fitting, you know, and then all of a sudden it just kind of boom, it's just all right there. And so when you think of quantum teleportation, oh man, Grant, he's my brother. So
Nice.
but like quantum teleportation, right? So we're on this. So they think at the very basic level, like particles pop in and out of space and shit. But that's not what's happening. We have a plane and there's like a corkscrew, and it hits and then 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 it hits. So in the math, it looks like shit is fucking jumping around everywhere, but it's not jumping around everywhere. It's just ticking the hologram in different places.
Yeah. I want to get to Grant's question here about metamaterials in a second, but that brings up something that's been puzzling me, that goes to this photons 100% wow comment from Sapphire Elf. And it's this idea that if you fathom for a second, like let's say you take a single electron, right, that we know can travel just infinitely fast, right? Like,
sure,
or a photon or whatever. Let's take an electron and you say, here it is over here, and you've got it in this one place as a particle.
Mm-hmm.
And it can instantaneously like turn off and then turn on over here, turn off, turn on, turn off, right? And if it's able to do that infinitely fast, then technically the rate of speed goes up so fast that it's perceived as being two places at once. Like, and this is no longer perceived as just a particle here and there and here and there. Sure, you can point and measure it as a particle over here and detect it, but technically it's going so fast beyond the speed of light that it's capable of being here and here simultaneous to our time and time, space, speed, and all that, and of awareness. So if that's possible, then you have, what if it's over here too? And what if it's over here too? And we're talking about one particle that has the quantum ability to become a unified field throughout all reality. One single point that is the all, in a way that we don't fathom. And technically, even the particle that's, I think, is me, is also you, and this idea of oneness in this unified field. But then when you're in that, you are an individual and you're going through it, and it's all slowed down and you don't perceive it that way. But that's why it's so paradoxical. This idea of like, of how something can be in a superposition, paradoxically, in two places at once, could be perceived as a unified field and a particle at the same time, depending on how you're measuring it. I don't know if,
no, I think there's some math out there. Like there's like a one electron kind of like conjecture that it's like, and I don't really understand it, but I do know that there are people who have like kind of like shown that it's mathematically plausible that maybe everybody shares the same fucking electron, and like that's
right.
I mean, is that true? I don't know. It seems kind of nutty, but maybe it's right. I don't know. But there's math out there, and that is not a totally implausible thing. But when you think about this, and this is when it made perfect sense to me, like in some ways, we see ourselves as separate from the universe.
Yeah.
And nothing could fucking be further from the truth. Because you think about, you're in a traffic jam, right? Like you're like, fuck this traffic jam. It's like, it's making me late. It's fucking 6 hours and I haven't gone anywhere. So like when you're in a traffic jam, you think the fucking traffic jam is slowing you down, but then everybody else thinks you're the fucking jam.
Right.
So it's like, pardon my French, I don't want to get you in trouble or anything for swearing or whatever.
That's all right.
But it's, we are more part of the universe. And the whole thing about being on the hologram and, fighting with time for the energy, our consciousness fighting with time for the energy, we're a lot more part of the universe than we really think.
Same thing, going back to the metaphor or analogy of being in a dream. When something in a dream looks like it's way over there or way over here or separate from you, technically it's a unified field experience where you're even perceiving everything within that realm as different objects and colors and even people and characters that will come up and talk to you, when ultimately the dream is one unified field of psychic experience that's occurring just within the self. And it's hard for us to fathom that. And when we wake up, it's so convincing during the daytime and physical reality that you just don't, it's like being completely hypnotized by it in the illusion. And you can't even fathom that everything you're perceiving in physical reality is like a hologram. It's like a dream, but it's the most crust physical edge imaginable possible, because it's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where we're actually gripping onto the edge of reality and trying to perceive it and gain information and learn, whereas at night you let go and kind of your consciousness relax and expands out into that field and becomes like that whole field. But it's not that much different when you really start probing at it.
Yeah. And think too, like, so imagine if, let's just accept for the sake of argument, the hypothesis that you and me, our consciousness is on the hologram right now, and we're running our consciousness, we're slowing time down, but you and I are connecting. I'm receiving signals from the hologram that see your face. I'm receiving signals from the hologram that is your voice. And so think about this. So our energy, right? If we're energy, our consciousness is energy run over the surface of the hologram, our energy is like mingling. Like
Yeah.
literally is interacting. You like you're I'm getting your energy. You're getting like, and I'm not talking about like touchy feely, like, 60s lava lamps or anything. Like, I'm talking about your energy is
Yep.
affecting my energy, and that's a fact.
Absolutely.
But then when you think about that now, like, what's it called when people distance viewing,
Remote viewing. Yeah.
remote viewing?
I've been doing that. I've done it. I'm 3 for 3 now.
It seems a lot more plausible now, because in some ways, if my energy is you're detecting it, right?
Yeah.
Then all you're talking about is maybe your energy detecting some shit in a different direction. Like, you know what I mean? Like, things become, we know if our neuron density went higher, to the point where, like air was like water, then actually we could fly, because we could just swim through the air like it was water, or
Right.
we could run like the Flash, or we could lift cars because they're buoyant in the water,
Right.
or in the atmosphere. So, like, when consciousness is so powerful, and I think everybody sort of poo-poos it, and everybody says, oh, you're fucking crazy, you're a crackpot or whatever. But I think there's so much power. And it's really, I'm not a consciousness like person like that. Like, I haven't been thinking about consciousness at all, except for like the last month or so, when I realized that if we're on the hologram, there's the consciousness, hummingbirds. Yeah, maybe there's something to this. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't, now I'm getting to the point where, I'm like, I need to open my mind. Like, I need
Yeah, man.
to listen to guys like you who've spent so much time, in the question, pondering, hey, what can I learn from these ancient civilizations?
Yeah.
Because you talk about stuff, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'll tell you what, man, I'm soaking it up,
Yeah.
and I'm going to remember. Like, and I think there's so much, and some people are like, maybe they're not right or something. That's cool. But I think until we really sit in the question and we try to soak up, like, the things that we can, and see if it fits into our puzzle, see if it makes sense. That's, I'm, I believe people when they say, hey, I got abducted.
Yeah.
I'm going to believe him. I mean, there's some people that are going to lie, but there are some people I'm fucking certain that are true. Because, like, think about why, even if it's us, like, all of the, like, the viruses going around, and, I'm vaccinated, right? I'm not like an anti-vaxxer, but this pill from Merck, this molnupiravir, there's the medicine that Merck just put out, this pill. It kills the virus. It kills the coronavirus by mutating it inside you. Like, that's a fact. You can look it up. I think the fucking zombies are coming, man. Like, there's just no way. And
Did
like,
you know that they literally just like 2 days ago started constructing like a 20-foot wall around the Capitol building with
wow.
literally in Washington. Like, why? Why are they building a wall around the
I don't know.
Maybe there is a zombie horde coming,
I mean, think about it. Like, we're in a situation now, we see pictures of like aliens,
Yeah.
like, or like, ostensibly they're, extraterrestrials that have like big heads and stuff. Let me tell you what, Zika does that to your head too. It really does. Like, Zika, remember how, like, it was like in mosquitoes and it was causing birth defects and all that stuff. Like, what if somebody taking molnupiravir, and I'm not trying to be weird, I'm just like, ask yourself if it's plausible. Somebody who's taking a pill that mutates coronavirus, which is like the most prolifically contagious virus, what if that person is infected with Zika, and coronavirus has a baby with Zika? And now, people you get aerosol Zika, or aerosol herpes, or aerosol AIDS.
Ugh.
Like, it's possible. And that I think what we're like, with how we're just like putting all kinds of shit in our bodies that we just don't even know what we're doing. What if in the future we pollute our DNA so bad that we really start having major problems.
Yeah.
Well, now the VAG and time travel, if that's plausible, it kind of makes sense that you would abduct people to try and unfuck the gene pool,
dude.
by
There's
getting pure DNA from the past.
There's
Like,
so many stories too, Brad, where they talk about like these extraterrestrials or the aliens in the story that they report after they're being abducted. They say that they were told that these entities come from like the future or an alternate timeline where through trying to survive the harshness of that environment of the planet or the ionosphere or disease and things, they go underground and get into these cloning operations and they deplete their DNA and gene pool to where it's like unsurvivable. So their only chance then is to try and go back and affect time through these time loops and to go back and affect their own reality in the future and save themselves by going back and correcting their mistakes. And I don't know how plausible that is, but it's super strange to fathom all the different possibilities. Like, could we have in the future, far distant future, pigeonholed ourselves into a non-survivable situation genetically where we're too polluted on the planet and our DNA and genetics through all this modifications and integrating technology into our systems, we become like screwed up. And the only way out of this cloning mess that we're in is to go back and try to affect timelines and stuff. But it seems to be really messy and anomalous. And I want to get to Brad's question really quick. He was asking about metamaterials. Do you think there's any kind of particular material for your free energy device or a metamaterial that maybe is a secret that you think might hold a key to unlocking all this, or like where the power differential that you're missing or something to really make it pop and turn on is maybe like an element that we're not aware of or hasn't been quite put to use the right way yet?
Yeah. So, okay. So, there's sort of two, I think, there's two things. So, and I want to talk about like the free quantum unlimited energy. So,
yeah.
So, and then, then we'll get to that metamaterial and how that comes in and why people are so hung up on metamaterials. So, okay. So you have this spinner in my anti-gravity engine. And so it spins, right? It puts out this field, right, that makes the apparatus massless. Well, it's still creating energy, right?
Right.
Like the action of the Faraday disc and everything creates energy because remember, it spins around the magnets and it shoves the electrons there. So it's minus in the middle of the disc and it's plus on the end of the disc. And so it's like a battery, right? And you connect it, it's like a battery. So the disc is spinning, right? It becomes massless. It reduces its mass. Okay. So now there's less friction. There's less resistance. It spins faster, creates a bigger field, more power, and more masslessness. Spins faster because it's less mass. And so essentially it's like this feedback loop where it gets faster because it gets massless, which creates more power, which makes it go faster, which makes it, and so at some point it becomes completely massless, takes almost no energy to sustain because it's completely massless. And now the energy it creates can feed itself to spin its massless spinner. And so it's essentially completely massless, takes almost no energy to spin, and is pumping out energy. Right. And so it could be the source, excuse me, of free, eternal, quantum green energy. Right. Because if it works and it spins itself into masslessness, then the more it spins, the lighter it gets, the more energy it creates, and it just keeps going. And so that's how it could technically maybe. Oh, excuse me.
You're good. Do you think, Brad, that it will create, like you say, there has to be the counter effect or kind of the reflex of that, where it creates a dark matter kind of exhaust from that experience? Do you think that's why with like UFOs and UAPs, there's this idea of like not only anti-gravity travel, but almost like a super cavitation, like a bubble around it of energy. Do you think it could be sort of harnessed or self-contained? And that's one of the things where you could, because it appears like they have the ability to not only do the technology that you're inventing and talking about and building, they have advanced levels of it to where they're able to basically control it. And speaking of like remote viewers and people that come out of this, these secret departments, they claim that a lot of these craft are controlled by consciousness. The pilots aren't in there using joysticks and knobs and stuff like a F-16 fighter pilot or anything. They're interfacing with the like almost an intelligent craft in a sense, because or it's perceived that way simply because it's moving outside of space-time. I don't know how it all works, but it seems like
so here's quantum
pocket
propulsion
around it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so here's quantum propulsion, right? So what happens is when there's something called Casimir force, right? And so what's going to happen when we create this, remember, okay, so we're taking, and it's actually a disc. We're not going to use, when we make our craft, we're not going to use like a solid disc that blows a solid field. What we're going to have is a hoop, okay? So it's going to create a hoop of a magnetic field and then a hoop of a magnetic field here. So you're still in your orb, but inside is undisturbed. And that's how you're going to get pilots in that craft, is because you're not going to do a magnetic field that's a pure disc circle. You're going to do a hoop. So it's like a force field of masslessness. And so what happens is that this is what I think happens. So technically, when you decouple the Higgs field, you renormalize. The Higgs field breaks the symmetry of the electroweak force. And the electroweak force, the weak part of it, is the weak nuclear force. Now, the weak nuclear force is the force that wants everything to be equal. It's the force that when you push a suction cup on a window and you try to pull it off, the weak nuclear force is pushing on the back of the suction cup to hold it there, because it gets mad if you create a vacuum. It does not want to see a vacuum. And so it's, whenever you try to start creating a vacuum, it's pushing like air, matter. It's trying to shove matter into that vacuum because it does not like a vacuum. That's called low entropy. And it's like the difference in the outside versus the inside of where that vacuum is, that difference is energy. It is. And so that's what we call Casimir forces. And so when we create a bubble of masslessness, right, we essentially, the Higgs field breaks the symmetry of the weak nuclear force. And that's why the weak nuclear force is like really, really, really weak. But when we renormalize the weak nuclear force by ejecting the Higgs field, now the weak nuclear force is really strong. And now it's trying, and I call this a mass hole, right? That's the mass hole. When you kick your mass out, you create a mass hole in the universe. And now the weak nuclear force knows that there's no mass there, because through what they call quantum fluctuations, it's like the weak nuclear force, even though it's not touching it, that's like, I know there's massless in there. I need to shove some mass in there. So here's your orb of your essentially anti-gravity field, and the weak nuclear force is shoving uniformly all around it, trying to shove stuff in there,
like suddenly cavitating an air pocket down under the pressure of the ocean. The entire field of the ocean around it wants to immediately collapse that emptiness back into balance.
Yeah.
And so
exactly. Now, I think, okay, so if you look at the Payas patents and all that, and they talk about cavitation, everything, I don't know. I think those Payas patents are sort of false flag, like counterintelligence. I think they're trying to get the Russians and the Chinese off on the wrong foot. Because what I think makes us able to zip around and stuff is masslessness. And our particles aren't constrained. They're not like tied to and we don't have like bosons and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, I think things can pass through us. I don't think we're hyper cavitating around things. I think we're actually, things are going through us. We are essentially quantum teleporting at scale.
Right.
And so I think I don't think we are. I think things can just pass through us when we're in this state. And I don't know. Somebody might be smarter than that than me, but I don't think it's because we're shaking. I think our particles are oscillating at the speed of light, and I think we can just go through stuff. But so the way that you can fly around. Okay, so we have this area that's undisturbed. So like you and me are like high-fiving in there. We're like, you know, having a apple juice or so, like everything kind of works. You can kind of steer and everything. Because one of the big things I was like, dude, how do you steer if you're like everything's passing through you and stuff? And then I was like, oh no, it's a hoop. So things are like regular in the middle.
Right.
And so I think what happens is we manipulate the quantum vacuum. And the way we do this is, so say you have your mass hole. The weak nuclear force is shoving super hard everywhere, trying to cram stuff into our mass hole, but it's not working. And so it's constantly pushing all around us. So what we do is we have directional microwave emitters. Okay. And what that's going to do is, if we shoot, and just like, the microwave that you cook your food in, your ramen, your Hot Pockets or whatever. So you turn it on and it's going to put some energy into a spot of that field. Okay. And so what you're doing is you're manipulating the quantum vacuum. You're creating, if like, say, here's your ship, right? And it's pointed this way. Well, if you shoot directional microwaves this way, then the weak nuclear force is going to go, oh, there's something here. I don't have to push as hard on the front.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to push less hard on the front, and it's going to push more on the back. And so essentially you're going to shoot microwaves and you're going to tractor beam yourself around, because
which maybe why you get this sense of them like being swooshy in the air like this when they're trying to hold still. They're like, woo.
Sometimes, yeah.
And
they'll just like, but if you wanted to go up, you would just shoot microwaves up, and then it would put a little bit of energy, so the weak nuclear force wouldn't push as hard up here, because it'd be like, oh, there's some stuff here, but where there's nothing, it's pushing harder.
Right.
And so it pushes harder in the direction behind where you shoot them, and it pushes less hard here. And that differential will shoot you, especially you're massless. So you only need like and you take off.
Yeah. And technically you could fly through mountains, solid objects, through the ocean even, and not even really create a splash, or like all kinds of bizarre phenomenon you'd perceive. You might even perceive them just as like a ball of light or orb or a plasma shape or sphere, because they're existing in this kind of like quantum massless state that gives off vast amounts of energy and radiation and things. If there's something malfunctioning or they have to stop and fix something, it could get all kinds of anomalous.
Yeah, I have a conjecture about that too. Like, how you see like, maybe you'll see like a big ball of light, right?
Yeah.
Well, remember, you're looking through a wormhole, and there's tons of gravity around that quantum echo. And gravity will lens light. Like gravity is energy bends space, and light goes through space. And so essentially the gravity lenses that light. So
you're looking at the other side.
Yeah, but it's scrambling all that light because of the gravity. And so if you see a big light ball at night, okay, I think you're seeing that ball because on the other side of that wormhole, it's daytime.
Yeah.
So you're seeing the daylight come through, but it's scrambled by all that gravity. And so it looks like a big poofy light ball. Sometimes you'll see them and they'll be red. And I think it's because it's sunset on the other side. And sometimes you'll see them and they'll be like a dark halo. And I think it's because it's nighttime on the other side there.
And this is also why sometimes they appear like a ball that comes down, and then like a being will just walk out of it. Like they see sometimes, like you'll see a shadow figure or something walk out and then just disappear. And like, who knows how weird this could get? We don't even fathom it. You're just scratching the surface of it and trying to like build this device in your own house on your back porch to even just to pick at this question to try and see if it can be had,
Yeah. I mean, Gary Voorhees, right? UAPX.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He owns UAPX, and he's making these vehicles, and they're going to be tricked out with like all kinds of sensors and everything. And I gave him $250 for that. And I was like, dude, I want you to put a spectrometer on a telescope. And if you catch a ball of light, right, like a UAP that's one of those like light balls, I want you to give me a spectrometer, a reading. I want you to take a reading on that light that's coming out of that big white ball. Because if the spectrometer, if the analysis, it's like the, they do like the different wavelengths of light and all that shit. Well, if he does a spectral reading, spectrometer reading, spectrography, whatever it's called, spectrographic, whatever they call it. But if he gets a reading on that light, and if that light matches the light from daytime, then I'm fucking right. If he takes a reading from that light and it's daylight coming through, and he does a reading and it looks like a fingerprint, and the fingerprint matches when he takes a reading of regular sunlight in our time, then that means it's a wormhole, because there's sunlight coming through that wormhole. And if that sunlight matches our sunlight, then I'm right.
That's fascinating.
And
it's
so
like
that's why I want
looking through a window or porthole almost more than you're actually seeing the craft itself.
Yeah.
Until
And
it
if that
slows
light
down to
matches
our
our
time.
sunlight, if the frequencies of all the light and all that, if it's an exact match between the light that's coming out of that UAP hole, what I think is a wormhole, if that spectrometer reading matches just a regular spectrometer reading from daylight, from just our daylight, then it corroborates the quantum echo hypothesis, and I'm right.
Yeah, and even if you're out there in the dark and your eyes are all adjusted and dilated, and then one of these things kind of manifests in the sky or whatever, then depending on the angle, of course you're thinking that the sun is set and on the other side of the planet and everything, but if this thing appears and you're seeing a glimpse through like a wormhole or whatever to the other side, the sun could be actually
in
that
the future,
timeline in the future.
The sun's
there,
up.
so where it's like looking right at the sun. So when it appears or blinks in and out of our physical reality, it's like, wow, like looking at a welding torch, because you're trying to look at right where the sun is on the other side, right at the sun on a bright day. And other times, wow, so fascinating, man.
And I mean, that makes the sonic gravity quantum echo hypothesis in the scientific method, that makes it falsifiable. Like, that's legit. That's a legit hypothesis, because if you take a spectrometer reading of one of those things in the middle of the night and the light coming out of it is the same as daylight, then okay, it's corroborated. That kind of is a big check mark in favor of the sonic gravity quantum echo hypothesis. But if it comes out different, then that means that's a check mark against it.
Right.
So, and when something is falsifiable, when you can do a test and see one way or the other if it's right or wrong, if the prediction is incorrect, then it's falsifiable. So it's legit. It's a legit scientific hypothesis. Oh, and Grant asked about metamaterials. So so when we do this to hold open a wormhole, right? To hold open a wormhole, you need negative energy density. The math to get like the equations to work, right? You need negative energy density. Okay. And right now they're like, fuck, how do we create negative energy density? Right? How do you do it? And so we know in the quantum echo hypothesis, we become massless. Our mass trails in the past, right? Like, toilet paper at the bottom of our shoe. And it's the stretch in the Higgs string, my understanding of quantum gravity, that gives us gravity. Because when you stretch the Higgs string the same way that like when you take off in the rocket ship and you get stretched in time,
right,
that those G's you feel, that's gravity. And so think of the crazy amount of gravity when all your mass like drags way back into the past, right? That's going to create so much gravity, and our particles are massless. So there's no positive energy density from mass.
right.
So all we're sitting in is an ass load of negative energy density. And that's what you need in the math to hold open a wormhole. So my negative energy density comes from the gravity of decoupling the Higgs field and throwing a quantum echo into the past. So I get my negative energy density in my quantum echo hypothesis by decoupling the Higgs field, creates an ass load of gravity around my massless ness. And so I'm sitting on a shitload of negative energy density, and that's a fact, right? And so, but in order to get, but nobody else does it that way. What they're saying is they want to create a funky material that has negative energy density, because it doesn't, everybody agrees that what you need is either an exotic material that will just give it to you. And some people think, you know, plasma can do it, super fucking hot plasma, and that's cool. Plasma could do it. There's a lot of people that are like pushing that, and like, maybe, you know, plasma could do it, because if it things at super high temperatures fuck with quantum fields, and so it could work. But I don't know, man. Like, how you gonna fucking hold on to a 1 billion degree ball of plasma? Like, I mean, like you know, like some people think maybe a magnetic, you know, jar or something, maybe they could.
Yeah.
But I think that's just like in the way too hard to do category. You know, I don't, and you know, making some material that can slow light down or something.
Well,
I
they're
don't
even
know.
thinking, well, there's one of the theories, you know, the metamaterial, that they've only recovered it from crashed UFOs, or they've only been given it by extraterrestrials. And here's the thing about that, is that when you hear Bob Lazar talk about that, like when he was in Area 51 doing experiments on the UFO craft, that they had this metamaterial that they put in this little coupler, and they put a cup on it, and then it created all this like free energy, and they couldn't understand it. It's so awfully convenient to keep like China and Russia and our adversaries from actually discovering that all of this can run off of like simple things like that you're building in your house. And that when they uncover that it doesn't take that much, you don't want anybody else to figure that out. And so you say the only way that you can make these things fly was this is impossible interdimensional material that comes from another universe or from aliens. So unless you can talk to aliens and get some, we're the only ones that have it. And so immediately people just go, and they quit even trying to figure it out, because they're never going to find metamaterial, and they're not talking to aliens to get, you know, show and tell, and let's trade for some of your metamaterial and we'll give you this or whatever. So it would really make it convenient to keep all of this stuff seeming impossible to do at home if you had to have alien metamaterials in order to pull it off. But you're trying to just look at the fabric of reality and say this stuff is possible just by looking and just by paying attention to how things work, how everything is
just
operating.
listen to the physicists who have come before us and done all those brilliant experiments and come up with just all those just impossibly complex equations that tell us all these like different things. Just open your mind to it and soak them in, and then just assemble the pieces where they fit. That's
Right.
all I did, man. And
Yeah.
like, and if you listen to the quantum echo hypothesis, I put in every single snippet of like where I heard this different stuff. I put it all in there, because like I didn't figure this out. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
didn't do all this math, but I'm listening to the people who did, and I'm truly trying to love what their life's work. I'm trying to like really appreciate what it means and where it fits and all that kind of stuff. And you know, and so in a lot of ways I'm not really bringing anything to the table. I'm not like, you know, all I'm doing is just trying to essentially appreciate and really like suck the life force out of everything that just really brilliant people have done before I started flipping out when the Navy confirmed the existence of UFOs.
Yeah. Well, man, you know what makes a madman? You know, you talk and you joke about it and you say, I'm a madman and I'm doing this and that. But really what's crazy is somebody sitting there just crunching a bunch of numbers on paper and coming up with theories, and they have to erase half of the equation because it doesn't add up, and they just get stuck chasing their own tail down the same dead-end mazes and hitting their head against the wall. And sometimes you just have to take an alternative point of view and just say, well, let's see. let's just see if we can make this thing, and let's see. And just in the process of trying to get to the bottom of it and build this thing, we're having these conversations. You're going on all these other shows. You're exploring the nature of reality as a whole, being on the surface of a black hole, and the fabric of who we are. And it unfolds like this whole deeper level of the mystery of reality and what it means to be a human being. And Brad, we've been going almost 2.5 hours here. It's been just like this incredible, beautiful conversation. And I want to have this conversation again. When are you going to be trying to turn the vag on? Which, by the way, I love that everything is named with like Freudian, like you have the mass hole. Just make sure and leave the M on there, everyone. And you've got the vag and the mass. It's so fun because it just flies in the face of all these stuffy people in suits and ties, and the academia that thinks. But I mean, you're obviously onto something, and you've got a concept and a view of reality that fits in with everything I'm doing, studying the ancient past and the mysteries. I think that's the balance to all this. It's like there's that they didn't have all this technology. They didn't have metamaterials. They didn't have, you've got these ancient civilizations drawing the same sacred geometry and almost having figured out certain forms of energy that we don't even fathom now, or who knows, way of life, or how they move these giant stone blocks and all this stuff. Like, but just probing at these questions opens your mind. And somebody watching this, even if you're not the one that figures it out, it could be somebody watching this is just like, oh, and it's a missing piece to their puzzle or whatever. And that's what all this is about, is just boiling it down to the raw truth, getting to the bottom of it and seeing what we learn on the journey there. You know, it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the vibe for me just makes so much sense. Like, I just, I won't write off anything now. Like, seriously, man. Like you won't figure anything out if you aren't open to the idea that maybe you don't have everything. And I hope that this is like inspire somebody else to do, but I'm going to make it happen. I'll stake my reputation as a psychopath on it.
I feel like it, man. Every time I come over and look, I'm like, dude. And when I try to wrap my head around the logic, and every time I talk to you, I'm like, you act like you want to be crazy, but you're not crazy, man. Like the stuff that you're talking about seems like it fits with even like stuff that I've seen flying around, and
getting tired, right?
Answer the questions when I try to throw it into, what is it like when I go to sleep at night? What are these out of body experiences that I have when I do the gateway meditation programs? And everything that you're talking about doesn't sound crazy to me. And I'm looking at it from some really radical points of views and approaches, like mystical, almost shamanistic points of view, that I'm coming at these same kind of questions, like, is it possible, if it is consciousness based at the substrate of all this, then do we even need a device? Can we do this just with our mind and our soul and with our own perspective and our own point of view? Can we set our sails and transcend this? Is this what the yogis were teaching? And same way, I might not be able to teleport or turn invisible or travel through space-time, but I'm trying, using my own mind.
Dude, you lost 200 pounds through consciousness alone.
Yeah.
Like,
I know that.
Tell everybody that is amazing.
Yeah, I've definitely manifest different realities for myself using the power of my mind and consciousness and meditation and manifesting things. And I know that's a lot of jargon comes along with baggage and stuff, but there's something there's even I always get this word wrong, a piezoelectric. Is that what it's called?
Piezoelectric, yeah.
Piezoelectric. There's a piezoelectric effect that even happens within the brain and consciousness. And they know that when you're concentrating, even if you think of a bright light in your mind, they can measure photons coming out of the brain and off of the mind and out of the human body. You emit like photons and electrical signals and things. And if you start to ramp up the power of your own human mind and consciousness and use specific techniques and use hemisync and you can almost use your consciousness to cheat the laws of reality.
That's exactly what you're doing. Let me just interpret it through sonic gravity. Okay, so through your meditation and through your rituals of I don't know what it's called, but what you're doing,
It's very specifically is the gateway method that they used at the Monroe Institute, and I have friends that have adapted it to be actually effective because the CIA came in and put seatbelts on the whole thing. So
I
anyway,
believe it.
yeah.
So the same way that the neuron density of the hummingbird causes its time to slow, accelerates its metabolism, its heart beats when it's awake 1250 beats a minute, and when it's sleeping it beats 60. So in physics, if that's right, that we're consciousness on the surface of the black hole, and our neural activity competes with time for energy on the surface of the black hole, if you are doing things that are energizing and exciting more of your neurons, you're really stealing energy away from time, which slows your time down and elevates your metabolism. That is a fact.
Suddenly having
Yeah.
past life experiences or meeting versions of your future self, giving yourself advice and going into other realms, man.
Yeah, dude. And at the very least, you could be slowing your time, which elevates which I mean, like the hummingbird, elevates your metabolism. And so your consciousness, and this is like, I'm not talking about like foo-foo, like sensitivity. I'm talking about the science. I'm talking about the physics of your consciousness could slow your time down, which relative to the flow of time increases your metabolism and burns your fat.
Yeah.
In some ways, your mental exercises might be increasing your metabolism in the physics. Like, that's just fucking amazing. And you've lost 200 pounds.
Yeah. I was 400 pounds. And when I learned meditation, I was like at a wall. I couldn't lose. I would just go up and down and up and down. And when I learned meditation and transcendental meditation and different forms of it, it put me at a level of consciousness and honesty within myself that it literally shifted my reality. And I'm not even the same person. Like,
God, you could sell that. Dude, seriously, the
yeah.
physics of weight loss, whatever you're doing, is obviously elevating the activity of your neurons, which is slowing your time and jacking up your metabolism. Dude,
And
like,
even the perception of what
is
I'm doing when I
yeah.
physically am trying to lose weight and I go exercise or any of that, and I go through the process, the meditative mindset is like, oh, like next thing I know, I'm like, oh, my workout's done. And it was an hour longer than I thought, because you're literally stepping out of almost like stepping out of your own body and letting reality move along on its own. And then you come back to awareness and it's all taken care of and you're amped up and your body's sweating like crazy. I also have to be careful I don't hurt myself, because you can become so disassociated with like the exercises that you're doing. You realize, man, I wrenched my shoulder and I was in such a flow state. Like I was completely almost in another reality during this time. It's just like,
dude,
feeling positivity and visualizing so vividly the final result that it's like you're jumping forward to, like, every step forward is actually jumping into this other dimension. And when your mind takes a quantum leap forward, it's all of a sudden like you're there and you've lost all this weight and you feel like you didn't even have to do it almost. It's bizarre, man. I've had some really like incredible things happen when I started to explore all of this, and really cool. One last question here, Brad. What is next for the Vag? So when are you going to try and turn it on? When is this going to happen? And how can people find you to stay in touch with what you're doing and all your experiments?
Okay, so I just finished like my 10-page paper, because there's this Gravity Research Foundation, and like I think in March or whatever, or February, the papers are due. And I made a 10-page paper. It's on my blog. It's www.sonic hyphen, yeah, there it is, gravity.com. And so it's on there on my blog. I've just finished that. I need to just tweak it a teeny bit, maybe put some more endnotes in it. But so now I'm shifting to the Vag construction. I have all of the components I need, all the contacts I have. I'm like ready to go and build it. And so now I just need to find some time. Milo, Ashley's dog, died, and so I had to kind of shelve like some plans, to take care of business while she got herself back together and everything. And she's on the mend, and so I'm looking to build it, and it's gonna be so badass. I got that amp, I got these these like resistors and everything, and I'm just gonna be firing it up. I'm gonna have an oscilloscope, and there's gonna be like a readout on it and shit. It's gonna be fucking awesome. And and it's gonna rip. I mean, it's 160 billion times more powerful. So we're gonna see it. I'm gonna start building it. I'm probably thinking maybe 3 weeks or so I could probably have it all done.
Yeah.
So the big thing is I got to cut that spinner. It's like now I make them out of a computer like motherboard board, and I etch it, the copper and everything, and so it just takes a little bit to cut it and get it square, or get it nice and round and stuff. So I'm gonna fire that up, and when I do, man, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna come over. I'm gonna crash your podcast, and I'm gonna be like, dude,
we're all here on the we will all hear on the news that a house just like flew into the air in a ball of light and disappeared. And then
if something explodes on the East Coast, a nuclear bomb, you'll know it was me.
Next thing you know, you'll look out your window and you'll be over the ocean, and you'll realize, oh no, I'm the Tic Tac. Right? What have I done? No.
Or I'll crash and I'll be like, oh, this is Roswell, 1947, and then I splat.
Right. We better cover this up and say that it was aliens or something. Right?
It's Voorhees.
Right. Brad, this has been a stellar conversation, man. We covered so much ground. We talked about a bunch of stuff. Everybody needs to go follow Brad at Sonic Gravity on Instagram. You've got like a Facebook page, right? You've got like the whole shebang and a website. So I put the website down in the links below. Make sure and check them out, everybody. Thanks so much, everyone, for your comments and for the super chat. That was really awesome to experience. I had such a good time tonight. And let's do this again, Brad. You want to do it again?
Yeah, definitely, Carl. Man, I love you. It's great talking to you.
I love you too. You're like a brother to me, man. And I always feel like my life is better and I'm closer to home when we have these talks, and I learn so much, dude. I appreciate you. So you guys, until next time, we'll see you guys in the next one.